she's had a good relationship, and she has had a mini Trump cycle of being bashed by the media, being ejected from her committees during her first term. And now she's not only had many of her colleagues apologize, but they realize that it takes courage to speak out.
Now let's try Jan Halper Hayes, who was a former member of Donald Trump's transition team the first time round. Jan, can you hear me?
I can hear you just fine.
Lovely to have you here, Jan. Listen, let me ask you, what do you hope to hear from Joe Biden when he speaks on the White House lawn in just a few minutes' time?
I'm not sure I have any hope of anything concrete. So there's not much there. He got pushed out. They threatened the 25th Amendment if he didn't drop out of campaigning. I don't know what he'll say. And honestly, do I have to really care? He's invited the transition team in. They know how to deal with all of the problems during a transition. There'll be more problems, but they'll be able to anticipate them.
Right. I mean, Jan, you say, "Do I have to care?" Which clearly implies to me that you don't really care what he has to say. And there is a very well established role, isn't there, in the transition period for the president and his outgoing team when it comes to easing the way and helping the new team come in. Is that not important at all to you?
Well, that's the ideal of what they're supposed to do. When Clinton's team left the White House, what they did was they took certain letters off of all of the keyboards. You know, there's all those kinds of games that go on. But no, the reason that Trump had to fire so many people originally was that he was new to Washington and he took lots of recommendations about people. He's been going about this for 6 months in a very, very different way to make sure that he has the right talent in the right place.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm interested in thoughts about the new Donald Trump team. They're making those decisions now. We're going to be hearing about them, I guess, over coming hours and over coming days as the decisions are taken, as the leaks start getting out to the media and around the place, and as announcements are made. Of course, a lot of these people are going to need to be confirmed by Senate hearings before they finally can take office. So this is a beginning, not the end of that process of putting a team into place. Molly Ball from the Wall Street Journal. I think we now have you with us. Hello, Molly.
Yes, hello.
Hi, Molly. Good to have you here as always. What are you expecting, first of all, to hear from Joe Biden when he speaks?
I think, as Jen said, I hope that he will endorse the peaceful transfer of power and give a gracious welcome to his successor. That is something that we expect in a democracy, that's important to trust in a democracy. It is, of course, something that Donald Trump never did in 2020. But I do think it is important for our democratic system, for everyone to respect the results of elections and to encourage the public to come together after an election. And we heard Kamala Harris do that somewhat yesterday in her concession speech, telling people that they should respect the results of the election, and that it is fine to continue to fight for your beliefs, but it is time for America to recognize that this has been the result. So I expect another thing that we have seen Joe Biden do in many of his public speeches since dropping off the ticket, he believes he deserves more credit for his accomplishments, and he gave quite a long speech at the Democratic convention, much of which seemed aimed at insisting that he had done a good job and that people ought to recognize that. So there may be some element of that as well.
Yeah, I've been looking at a live picture coming in from the White House lawn. I mean, it's just over the road from where I'm sitting now. They still seem to be filling in the seats there in front of the presidential podium. So maybe a few minutes yet. Can't quite be sure, but we'll wait for that. We'll bring that live to you. I promise you, as soon as that happens here on Times Radio Drive. I mean, Molly, would we expect, is this normal to see the outgoing president, as well as Kamala Harris, the vice president, and the defeated candidate, on that stand when Donald Trump takes the oath of office in January? Would that be normal?
Yes, absolutely. Again, this is something that Trump declined to do after losing the 2020 election and refusing to concede. But generally, yes, generally, presidential transitions do constitute this sort of literal, almost literal passing of the baton. The previous presidents being up there on that chilly January day, again, it's a sort of vote of confidence in the democratic system for presidents of various parties to come together and say this is everybody's president now, and this is the person that we are all behind as a country.
Yeah, so Jan Halper Hayes from the Donald Trump side of things, are you hoping? Are you keen to see Joe Biden and Kamala Harris on that stand, that podium, that platform when Donald Trump takes the oath of office for the second time, just as a further signal of an agreed cordial transfer of power? Do you want to see that? Is that important?
No, it really isn't important because that would not be their intention. They would be false presence is what would be there. I mean, there is such a divide between the Democrats and the Republicans with policy issues, the way they handle things, what they think is important. And they might be rolling their eyes or what, or they might feel it's their duty, but they're not there because they support him.
Oh no, you wouldn't, Jan. You would not expect them to support him and what it is that he sets out to do. He was and is their political opponent. But we heard Kamala Harris last night when she gave her concession speech at Howard University, right here in Washington. That was something of a graceful concession, was it not? Is that not helpful for the purpose of just trying to bring the nation back together? You get some physical signs of that, including on Inauguration Day.
Well, Joe Biden campaigned on bringing us back to normal. That's how he campaigned. And there's this parable of an angel asking someone, let me show you what heaven looks like, and then shows hell. What do you want to choose? The guy chooses hell. When he gets there, he says, this isn't what you showed me. He said, that was the pitch to get you there. That's what campaigning has been. That's what showing up has been. And the thing that has always been the strength of Donald Trump is his authenticity. What you see is what you get. And the reason people support him is because, as he said in 2016, promises made, promises delivered. They feel he has their back. They can look through all of his faults because what he does has always been in the best interest of the people.
Oh, Jan, I've got to say, tell me if I'm wrong. It doesn't sound as if you are remotely in any mood to try to heal the wounds, to bridge the divide, because we've seen in the past Republican presidents have worked with the other side. I mean, Ronald Reagan is a famous example who worked across the aisle with his political opponents, quite often quite cordially. It sounds as if you are not interested in that kind of cooperation. Is that fair? And is that how you think Donald Trump's going to see it?
Well, to use the words not interested is wrong. I would be very interested. I was on a TV program last week in the Middle East with Mo Novello, who was a Biden appointee, and he kept interrupting me, and he kept telling me that I was disgusting and I was lying rather than disagreeing with me. And he went after me, and at one point I said, look, thanks for showing the audience exactly why this division will remain, because you won't even let me speak. You won't even give any credence. I refuse to interrupt you. And he was vicious. And that is the mindset of many of the Democrats. I mean, they wanted to deprive us of our free speech. And the worst thing that political correctness has done is that they don't want to hear you if it's different from how they believe.
Okay, interesting to hear the way you express yourself Jan. I mean, Molly Ball. And we will see, won't we? This thing will pan out and we'll see what actually happens rather than speculating about what might happen. But listening to Jan, though, and listening to others on the red side of the divide and talking to people the way that you do all the time, what hope do you hold out of some sort of coming together? I don't mean agreement on controversial policy, but just some sort of cooperation, some sort of cordial cooperation on Capitol Hill and elsewhere. Is that going to be out of the question, Molly?
I don't know. I think it will be interesting to see. I think, to Jan's point, there were a lot of Democrats who didn't view, who were so shocked by Trump's win in 2016, and many of them didn't view it as legitimate, although of course it was. And so many of them basically boycotted any kind of cooperation with him at that time. I would note at the same time that it wasn't as if he extended much of an olive branch either. Now that he has won this resounding victory, including winning the popular vote, I think it is possible that Democrats will be in more of a mood to cooperate. And then the question will be whether the Trump administration wants to reach across the aisle as well. And some of the policies that Trump is interested in pursuing are things that there might be some Democrats who would support, some of his trade policies, for example. But he also will have Republican majorities in the House and Senate. So it's going to be a question of both sort of legislative tactics of whether he needs Democratic votes for some of his priorities. And also, he's talked quite a lot about going after his political enemies, viewing many leading Democrats as what he terms the enemy from within, and wanting to erase the traditional independence of the Justice Department in order to use it as an instrument of his will. That would, of course, be detrimental to any sort of goodwill or cooperation. So we'll see if he ends up keeping that promise that he's made on the campaign trail.
Yeah. Molly, yes, go ahead, please, John.
If I could just add something, that when you are on Capitol Hill, you see that our politicians get on very well together. We have been calling it the uniparty because they give in on different things. But for the media, they act as if they're enemies. And once I asked a former congressman, how come you haven't worked out immigration? You haven't worked out gun control? And he said to me, if we solved it, what would we have to campaign on? And that is really an important thing to know because we are all dissatisfied with our politicians because they focus on themselves and not really on we the people. So that is another thing that plays out. And they're in cahoots together a good amount. You got dinos and rhinos being together, Republicans in name only, Democrats in name only.
Well, I hear what you say. Look, while we're talking and while we're waiting for Joe Biden to come out at the podium on the lawn and tell us what he has to say to the nation and I guess to the world, we're waiting for the Trump side to start the business of putting in place their top aides, their senior aides in the new administration. Now, just one that's been floated that I saw just in the last few moments, Molly, was the idea. It was floated, I think, by Steve Bannon, who's a pretty hard-line supporter, has been for years, of Donald Trump. He seems to have floated the idea of appointing Marjorie Taylor Greene as Homeland Security Secretary. Now, she is as hard-line as they come, don't you? I mean, do you think that's realistic? And what would that mean?
I don't think it's realistic. I think it would be difficult for her to be confirmed by the Senate, although one thing that the Trump team has been looking at is the idea of bypassing Senate confirmation for some of their potentially more controversial appointees.
Can they do that?
So, I would take that with a grain of salt, just in the sense that is not coming from the actual transition effort. She is, of course, someone who Trump likes very much and whose opinion he values highly. But I don't know that is the direction that he'll be looking for a cabinet appointment.
Sure. No, these are some. I think this is, I guess, some of the speculation that's flying around at the moment. That'll be the case for, I guess, a little while to come. You say that maybe on the Trump side, they're looking at bypassing the process of getting appointments confirmed on the Hill by Congress. Is that possible? Can you bypass that process then?
We will see. I mean, it is the Constitution says that the Senate has this role of advise and consent. In the later part of Trump's first administration, he did have a lot of acting secretaries because they couldn't or wouldn't go before the Senate to get confirmed, and but that was something that he had already been in office for a couple of years, so there was a deputy who could serve in that acting position. There are a lot of technicalities having to do with the Vacancy Act that governs the succession, and I won't bore you with it. But so the answer to your question is it's going to be up to the courts to decide if they decide to take that step, what exactly is allowed. But it is something
Right.
that the Commission's been looking at.
Right. I mean, Jan Halper Hayes, how would you like the idea of Marjorie Taylor Greene, the fiery Georgia Congresswoman, as a role in the cabinet, maybe Homeland Security or maybe whatever it is? Would you like to see her in the top lineup, Jan?
Most definitely. She doesn't hold back. And no matter what people think of Trump, he welcomes a variety of ideas. She's had a good relationship, and she has had a mini Trump cycle of being bashed by the media, being ejected from her committees during her first term. And now she's not only had many of her colleagues apologize, but they realize that it takes courage to speak out. And that's always been one of our complaints. We consider a lot of the Republicans absolutely feckless. They're more concerned about going to the cocktail party circuit than they are about ruffling any feathers.
Okay, Jan, tell me, are you expecting or hoping to get some kind of role in the administration? It's not just about the cabinet and the top team in the White House. There are hundreds of appointments to be dished out by a new administration. Are you hoping to get one of them?
Well, there are two possibilities. I've been very close to a general because, I sit on a Department of Defense task force since 2019. We've been monitoring this entire country to understand where their heads are at. And if this general is appointed and they've been talking to him, I might go work for him. And what I'd really like to do is be on the Elon Musk team to clean up government.
Really? Have you spoken to Mr. Musk about that?
No, I haven't, but I've got my feelers and connectors out.